everybody. My dad thinks his podcast is amazing, so please subscribe, give it 5 stars or whatever, and maybe he'll finally stop talking about it. Anyways, welcome to Sobriety.
Amy York, who owns a company, Amy York Ceramics, who made me this one hell of a beautiful coffee mug for my 1-year soberversary. Let's welcome Amy to the show. Hey, Amy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I was just telling everybody about this incredible 1-year sobriety mug that I got from you.
Oh, that's so awesome. Was it your 1-year mug?
Yep, that was my 1 year. Sure was.
That's awesome.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's gorgeous outside in Montana. Holy cow. It's really showing off.
I wish we could say the same here. We got all that hurricane rain coming up into Tennessee, so it's been a little crazy the past day.
Yeah, are you guys in a floodplain over there?
All of Knoxville is like a flood zone, honestly. Like it's all pretty much wetlands, so it just gets muddy and gross.
Great. Love that.
Well, thanks for joining us on the show. We really appreciate it. And we wanted to talk about, obviously, your sobriety and relationships and stuff like that. But when was it that you decided, hey, this has become a problem for me. I need to eliminate alcohol from my life altogether and kind of go forward from there?
Yeah, it's interesting when I start to think back over just like using substances in general. It's kind of always been a thing. Like it's always been problematic for me. There was never a time when it was like, oh, this is just fun. I can take it or leave it. Like, even as a kid, and I say kid being like 15, there was always something where I just wanted to be a little bit farther over the line than everybody else. And not even wanted to, it was just like, that's where it always ended up. And I think that what brought me to finally like, just be like, you know what, I want off this roller coaster, was, well, there were a number of things, many different times. But this time around, my dad got diagnosed last September with stage 4 advanced cancer. And because of his lifelong drinking, he's not a candidate for a bunch of different treatments that could extend, like he's never going to be better, but that could extend his life. There are so many amazing drugs out there now where people who find themselves sick can live for a really long time. And there are lots of those things that are really rough on your organs. And my dad's just not a candidate. And he can't have surgery. And he has, alcohol related cirrhosis that makes him like too sick to get help for his sickness. So I was like, when that happened, I drank about it for like 3 days. And then I was like, what the fuck am I doing? I don't feel lucky, but it's a unique position to have access to a front row seat to what your genetics look like in end stage alcohol abuse. And I was like, he's 64. I was like, no thanks.
Yeah.
I'm out on that, so that was like, not to use the word sobering, but that was like a big thing where I was like, oh, let's figure this out, So
yeah, that was a big aha moment for you. Obviously,
yeah, I think I've heard you say on the podcast before, you don't really get away with anything. You might think that you're getting away with stuff, but you're not getting away with anybody. You're not tricking. Like if you think that you're okay, or you think that nobody's noticing that you're, repeating yourself or a little bit over the line on any, you wake up the next day and because you have, a selective memory, you like, oh, I was fine. But you don't everybody who isn't on that same playing field, which most people aren't, let's be honest, they know, and and your body keeps the score, like people say all the time. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's hearing you talk about your dad. My mom passed away a few months ago, and she did not take care of herself, her body at all. And she struggled with a lot of like substance abuse and mental health stuff. And I'll say the mental health stuff, it turned into some substance abuse. And I kind of had that moment too. Mine isn't like addiction related, but more mental health. And I remember looking at my mom, and as much as I love her, and she was a fantastic woman and worked her ass off and was a great single mom and did all the things. Something that I would talk to Ryan about is I was like, I don't want to end up like my mom. Like, I want to have her tenacity and her strength and her drive, but she put it all into us and there was nothing left over for herself. And that's what I kept thinking is when you see someone you care about who goes from like, and I don't know how your dad was when you were a child, but like someone you admire who is so strong and can literally move mountains, and just over a long course of time, they don't take care of themselves, or it's very like self-deprecating and they become this hollow shell of who they were. It's scary. It's scary.
Yeah.
And just like with addiction, mental health is genetic, and, if you have it in your family, you're predisposed. And I had that same, even when she passed, like one of the last things I said to her was like, Mom, I promise I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to do all the things that you wanted me to do, that I'm going to make sure that I'm healthy and take care of myself so that I can be strong. And that I definitely resonate with that because, it is a sobering thing to see because, for me, I hated in the latter portion of my life that no one got to see this like amazingly strong, brilliant, awesome woman, because it over a long period of time, it sort of deteriorated. And so I definitely can feel you on that one.
Yeah. Without your health, you have nothing. And it's also, you guys have kids, I have kids. And it's one of those things where often I hear people say things about how tough it is to be a parent, or, just needing a break. And I'm like, wow, I would never want my kid to internalize my absence as being their fault. And I did that when I was young. My dad, like I said, was a drinker when we were little. He wasn't a drunk. I can count on the time of my hands that I've ever, like one hand, every time I've ever seen him drunk, but he always had a beer in his hand, always. And at some point, you're just not present for your own life. And I internalized that as me not being enough. And I would like try to get his attention and try to get him to pay attention to me. And he was always like tinkering on stuff. He's an extremely hard worker. I get my work ethic from him, and from my mom. My mom is an amazing human too. But he had loads of generational trauma that I had no idea about. And he self-medicated with alcohol. I internalized that as being him not wanting anything to do with me, not like caring what I did. I remember when I said like I got this internship in college, he was like, well, why the hell would you want to go there to New York City? And I was like, be proud of me, like tell me like graduate from college, like move across the country, like all of these things. And it wasn't that he wasn't proud, because I know that he's proud of me. It was just that he was so emotionally stunted from his own generational trauma that he could barely participate emotionally in his own life. And he had no room to participate in me or my sister's lives either. And I always had this like not good enough feeling. So I put this like incredible pressure on myself all the time and I had this like perfectionism complex because I thought that I was never good enough for anybody, especially for the men in my life, for my husband. And I was always going above and beyond and doing all of these things, which would then put pressure on me. And then I would drink because I had all of this pressure on myself. But I was the one putting it there. I remember opening up to Adam about like, I just can't do all of this stuff anymore. And he's like, what stuff? And I would like name all of these things. And he was like, I never asked you to do any of those things. I thought you just liked doing it. And I was like,
so
a big moment. Yeah. It was like, oh, you just thought that I was like out here fucking killing myself to like get all this shit done and to like be this perfect housewife and this perfect mother and this perfect whatever. Like for funsies, you know, but it was true. It was my own impossible standards because of this like not good enough complex that I have going back to, I think, I don't know, the absence of my father figure in my life, you know?
Yeah, that's so funny. My situation was a little flipped. So my mom had tons of childhood trauma. And she was very open with my brother and I, but I mean, age appropriately open with her experiences. But she always went overboard. So, you know, came from very poor, sort of backwoodsy, but she put us in private schools and wanted us to have all of these things. And I mean, worked way too hard. I mean, she did too much. I know that sounds terrible. I'm very grateful, but like so much, there was nothing left. And it was sort of that same deal where she's like, you know, she was so fearful that she tried to go to college 3 times and she never made it. She just couldn't do it. She just didn't have the education. She had all of the ingredients except for the ability because she didn't have that foundation. So she was always so afraid that we were going to end up in whatever way. So she would go overboard. And I always kind of use this as a funny sort of example. Like if you asked my mom to make you a bagel, right? It would never just be like bagel cream cheese. It would be like bagel with overflowing cream cheese with like a garnish and like a freshly squeezed juice and like a pretty napkin, like folded a certain way, you know, which is great. And I'm so thankful, but it took me a really long time to understand that a lot of that, though it was wonderful and beautiful, was her trying to process her trauma. And just like with you and your dad, like there comes this moment where you learn to meet someone where they're at and you learn that like they are proud, they are happy, that it's more about them than it is about you. And she had sort of those same sort of insecurities. And so what I've seen just with my mental health with alcoholism, something that he and I talk about a lot on previous podcasts is like, you know, when you're drinking, when you're struggling with anything, you lash out on people because you're angry within yourself. I mean, it doesn't make it okay. It doesn't excuse the behavior, right? But like with your gambling, you know, we kind of went into a funny little snippet about how you'd be like, what'd you spend $30 at the restaurant or grocery store for? And which sounds ludicrous because it is, because you're actually keeping a mental tally of everything you've done. And you push that onto someone else to take the focus off of you. And
it's the guilt.
It's the guilt and everything. And it's just like with your dad, the same thing. Like, of course he loves you. Of course he's proud of you. I know my mom was too. But being a human being is fucking hard. That's what I tell people. It is so hard. And you become adults and you realize like these people aren't just your parents. They're actually like full, complete people with their own trauma, with their own issues. And it really does give you a better appreciation and make you a better parent too when you're a parent.
Absolutely. And, you know, going back to like the perfectionism and having like, you know, the bagel, like just the perfect spread all of the time. I think that I used that perfectionism piece as like a way to distract other people from looking at me like too closely, you know, or from like anybody having anything to say. And it was like, okay, so dinner was made, the house is clean, I've got all my shit together. Like, look how together I am. So you can't possibly say that, oh, and now you're going to criticize my drinking. You know, like when we're drinkers, we get so defensive over, over like people pushing back against our behaviors. And I wanted to leave like no stone unturned to make sure that all of my stuff was perfect all the time so that nobody could ever say, like, it looks like you're struggling, you know, like, oh, like, let's just keep that in a different little box and look how everything else is like really great.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like Ryan too. He was the same way. Like, if you weren't his mom or his wife, then he checked all of the boxes. You know, great job, not a wake up and drink, never went to work drunk, like not someone
Yeah.
you didn't think they didn't have their shit together. I mean, they're like, but you know, you guys have a beautiful home, you drive nice cars, your daughter goes to a great school. We always see you guys together and you go on vacation and you post all these pictures and you're like thriving and successful. Right, until he gets home from work and he drinks until he's blackout drunk and that filter goes down and becomes mean. You know what I mean?
Which was funny when I became, when I told everybody, and, you know, I waited, you know, like 3 months to tell everybody that I was sober. When I say everybody, like literally everybody that I announced it to. And every time that I talked to somebody one-on-one individually, they said, wow, I never knew you had a problem.
Right.
And I was like, well,
Yeah.
of course you didn't, because you don't see what's behind the curtain, right? You know,
Yeah.
it's a magic trick. You watch, right, you know, look it over here, don't look what's behind me. And
Yeah.
and that's what it was. It was almost like playing a part. I was never really me. And
Right.
of course, now that I've become sober, you know, I'm more honest about everything, and everybody sees the true me now, and it's a completely different person than what they're used to, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, and in social situations and stuff, you know, I think, you know, there's this misconception that you hear from not childhood, but from your young adult life, that alcohol gives you confidence, right? But alcohol does not give you confidence. It just masks your insecurities. So when you're in a social situation and all your insecurities are masked, you're not showing up as yourself. And categorically, if you're not showing up for yourself as yourself, you're showing up for someone else as someone else. So you might be like the most social person out there having a great time, but then you get home, you go to sleep, you wake up the next morning and you're like, what was that? What, like, who was that person? You know, and then that's when all the insecurities come back that were masked, because you have no idea who your authentic self is. And you constantly are trying to like figure out, in every situation, you're mirroring the entire time. You're mirroring and you're masking, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting because you have these different friend groups, your work associates, your family, your you know, friends from the golf course or whatever they are, you know, my ceramics friends, my teacher friends, my family people, you know, and you're a different person in all of those, because you're mirroring what you think that people need from you. And that people pleasing stuff is like something that in my non-drinking life, I don't do that anymore. And it is awesome.
It's very freeing.
It feels so good.
Freedom.
That was part of my mental health journey too, because I was doing that a lot, right? Especially trying to juggle just my mental health that I dealt with. Even if you had never taken a sip of alcohol in your life, I would still have that. But then also having a husband who's struggling and having to mirror match, like, and it's scary how good you become at it, where it just, you'll do it, not even think.
Yes.
Like, we would get in arguments, like verbal altercations, where I'd be like, you know, you've already had a 6-pack and now we're going here, you can't drink anymore. And of course it'd be like, don't tell me what to do, and this, that, or another. And then like a light switch, we go out in public and be like,
everything's
hey,
perfect.
like the cute couple. And I think that you get so comfortable doing that, whether it be in a relationship or individually, that when you break that habit, you look back and you're like, gosh, no wonder I was always so tired or overweight or angry or snapping at my kids.
Just mentally,
everything.
you know, I never realized
Mental
how
gymnastics.
mentally wore out I was until sobriety.
Yeah.
You know, like the sleep. I mean, obviously you get better sleep when you quit, you know, you take alcohol out of the equation. But like you said, the mental gymnastics that it takes to cover shit up or to be somebody else, talk about wearing your ass out. I mean, that's just,
and you
God,
lie
it's
to yourself
terrible.
in the moment and be like, it's fine. Like
Yeah.
everybody does this. It's no big deal. But you touched on something, Ryan, that I think is so appropriate. Like a lot of, unless you were in I call it our inner circle, which is like friends that are almost like family and family.
Yeah.
You really didn't know, number one, you have a white collar job. So everybody drinks bourbon, right? Like that's like a huge deal. Everybody drinks beer. Do you know what I mean? Like they wear their Miller Lite shirts proudly. And, but since he's gotten sober, people are like, I can now see it. Like they didn't see it before, but they're like, you really are a completely different person. And it's just, you know, the way you react to situations and your patience. And you're right, like you're rested. I mean, even without mental health issues or alcohol, I tell anybody, just try going just like 2 days without really good sleep and nutrition, and you will not be a nice person to yourself or to the people around you. So I totally agree with that.
And it's interesting, like on saying that you're sober, or however you want to classify yourself, sober, non-drinker, alcohol-free, like whatever it is, disclosing that to all of your groups, but all of the different people that you associate with can feel so overwhelming, like especially in the beginning, because you aren't sure if you have that trust in yourself to continue, right? You're like, am I like really doing this or whatever? But then also like it really says more about the pressure that society puts on you to drink alcohol than it does about how hard or not hard it is to say, I don't drink alcohol. I was saying to Ryan before we did this, I was like, you know, I'm a little nervous to go on a podcast and talk about this because I was more than willing when I was a drinker to make alcohol my whole personality. You know, people do it all the time. Like, oh, I'm a wine drinker. I'm a beer drinker. I'm a bourbon guy, like whatever it is, bourbon gal, doesn't matter. You know, you're more than willing to self-identify as a person who drinks X kind of alcohol, but it's so much harder to identify as someone who doesn't drink alcohol at all. And like, that says nothing about you as a drinker. It says everything about the world that just expects everyone to drink alcohol. And it's so strange.
Well, it's you know, it's the only like drug in the world that when you tell somebody, hey, I don't drink, they look at you funny.
Yeah, you don't walk into a party and they'll be like, hey, you want to shoot up some heroin?
Yeah, you want to shoot some heroin up? What?
Yeah.
No.
Well,
why not?
I've even noticed too, like, we are now marketing non-alcoholic beverages that give you a buzz like alcohol without the alcohol. Like, and that's a very slippery slope too. And I'm not talking about just like NA beers or mocktails. Like I'm talking about, you know, infused drinks. And again, people can moderate, right? Like this podcast is for everybody, but it's really for people who are struggling with substance, more particularly alcohol. And I'll like go through my Instagram feed and I see like get a buzz without the booze. And I'm thinking that makes no fucking sense. Like what?
One, it seems like.
What?
Yeah.
So yeah, the societal pressure to, you don't want to feel sober. You don't want to feel normal. You know, we talked about this too, like mommy wine culture and all of that. Why would you want to actually sit with your feelings? Like, come on, everybody after work wants to feel relaxed. Well, yeah, I don't want to feel high or drunk though. And it like pushes on you. And it's such subliminal messaging that until you remove yourself from that, you're like, oh my gosh, it is everywhere.
Nonstop.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and everybody's trying to sell something, right? And so the idea that's constantly sold to you is that you have to have something outside of yourself to feel okay and to feel good. And like the farther I get from my last drink, the less that I want to have anything else dictating my mood besides me, because I want to be in control of it, which is interesting because when I was drinking, I didn't want to be in control of it. I would drink to escape all of my emotions, all of my big emotions, all of my happy ones, all of my sad ones. Like, it didn't matter what it was, like celebratory drinking. It's a nice day outside drinking. There's a hurricane coming drinking, you know, like whatever it is, those things were just like, let me put something, like, let me put a substance in my body to make me feel okay about whatever this is. And I've been actually cutting back on caffeine because I noticed that I would go to put my kid to bed and I would like feel a little groggy, and I would brew coffee at 2 p.m. and I'm like, what? I'm doing the same thing with caffeine, which, I mean, harm reduction, like whatever, but I'm doing the same thing with caffeine that I was doing with alcohol, which is like, let me have a little treat myself, you know? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that from time to time, but when you're doing that daily on the regular to like change your mood, it's like, you know, how about I come out to my studio and put my hands in some clay, and then I will like feel better? How about I go for a 10-minute walk, a 20-minute walk, and then I'll feel better? How about I just like quietly like sit and stare at a blank wall? That's what this wall right here doesn't have anything on it. This is my blank wall that I stare at.
I love that.
I
love
come
that.
in. You know, I used to come into my studio and I would be like, I need to get ready. Like, I need to get good in the mindset. And I would crack open a beer, like a high octane IPA. And that's how I would get ready. But it didn't make me ready for anything, you know, like my productivity would be right here and then it would go, you know. And
I was going to say, speaking of that too, you know, you being an artist, I mean, there's obviously a lot of stigmas that come along with that, I'm sure. Especially in that culture. So
yes.
How's that kind of changed for you, or what's that all about? If you want to go in and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, you know, I hear people often talk about like how they you know, need to be altered in some way to have a good idea or feel like they do. And I think especially early on, I'm just under a year, so it's not like I am some sobriety guru, like I'm just figuring it out too. But I think what I really needed to figure out was like, okay, so what is it about making art that does give me like almost like a high? Because I thought it was like the alcohol paired with the art. And so what happens when you get into a flow state? We've talked about this in, you know, like the recovery rooms, if you will. People talk about getting into a flow state as a way to like, as a way to not drink, like have something else to do, you know, with your brain. But when you get into a flow state, what it does is it circumvents your prefrontal cortex, and that's where your inner critic lives. And so art is something that can give you access to your own, I guess your own like self-worth without being critical of it. And alcohol takes you out of that loop. So when you are making work and you're getting into a flow state, you actually are able to have good ideas that you normally wouldn't have. It calms your nervous system. If you have like a spicy brain or something like that, all of your anxieties, like those things melt away because you are engaged in something that is giving you this positive feedback, and your inner critic is shut down. I think of it a lot of times, I think of it as play. We don't do enough play at all. And oftentimes people think that the opposite of play is work, but the opposite of play is not work. The opposite of play is depression. So when you are trying to find something like, where in my life can I get into a state where I'm not going to be thinking about what time it is. I'm not going to be looking for this portion of my day to end. You just want the time to go on and on. You get into that flow state. Like that is where you need to put your time and put your creativity to use so that you can really have one of those moments that is empowering instead of one that leaves you like anxiety ridden and nervous about about finishing your tasks for the day. We've lost so many people in the creative world to the lie that alcohol makes you more creative. so many people are just plain not on this earth anymore because they thought that a substance was going to give them some sort of like unlock some door into this creative universe. But it's not true. You have to be able to latch on to your own unique perspective without having something that is constantly dulling that perspective and making you think that you need to like go search out another beverage before you finish working on whatever it is you're working on.
I love that. It's like the lost art of imagination, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with that. And this is diverting from topic just a smidge, but there are a lot of studies talking about, like, even in early childhood education, how, when it comes to being in even kindergarten or first grade now, the structure of just like a classroom, how education and play are seen as these two different fundamentals. Like, oh, we have recess and then we have reading time,
Right.
when really most kids are multisensory. Most people are, and they don't even realize it. Everyone's learning abilities are different, and allowing kids as they grow to integrate that play and that imagination along with education. Like Montessori is really good at that. It does, like, it produces much more like level-headed, less likely to have substance abuse and a lot of mental illness, adults, really, really creative adults.
Yeah, Brene Brown talks a little bit about this. She says in one of her books, and I say this often, I teach adult ed, I don't know what you call it, ceramics classes for grownups. That she says that 85% of people report that they experience something shaming in school that fundamentally changed them as learners. And of those 85% of people who say that, more than half of those things were in a creative space. So more than half of adults have like actual art scars from school. And I think that we need to change the narrative of like, I'm just not a creative person. I'm just not someone who makes, who can make stuff. Like, I can't draw a stick figure. If someone like finding out that I make art for a living, like, people always, I can't make a stick figure. I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. Like, those kinds of self-limiting beliefs just aren't true. Everyone is creative, whether it's like creative problem solving or actually painting on a canvas or throwing pots on a wheel. Everybody has those things, and those kinds of things in sobriety are monumental. Something else to do with your time that makes you feel good and gives you belonging. Like, I always tell people, look up and see. You're not a potter? Great. Look up and see if there's a studio in your area, because literally no one starts a ceramic studio to make money. They do it because they have passion. And what you need in your life is people who have passion. Go find those people and become part of the community. Like 15 years ago, I wasn't part of the ceramics community, because I was just learning. I wasn't there yet. But you can find belonging in circles outside of alcohol. You just have to look for it. You have to want belonging somewhere else. You can sit at home. I'm so bored. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm like lonely. And it's like, okay, so what are you going to do about it? Like, action, right? You have to take action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like it's funny you talk about that, the creative part. I never thought I was like a creative person. I would just like, I just thought, well, I'm just a sales guy, right? Well, I started journaling. So I started writing. It's like, shit, now I'm a writer. So I guess I kind of am creative.
Yeah.
I bought adult coloring books and colored pencils, and I would color to pass time.
I am such a big fan. No, it is. I'm such a big fan of coloring books. I love doing paint by numbers, and I have a painting degree. It's about taking out the inner, like, I will sit there and paint. I want someone else to make the decisions sometimes, like being moms, being grownups, having jobs, having lives. We make so many decisions, and like a paint by number, you don't have to make any decisions. Adult coloring books, the lines are already there. You don't have to be critical of what it's going to look like. all you have to do is get into the zone, get into that flow state. And it's going to, like, your endorphins are going to go through the roof. You're going to get that dopamine that your brain is craving in early sobriety, that like just wants a hit of something that feels good. You can get that. You can get that through getting into a flow state. You can get it through running, working out, cooking. All of those things are creative things. They do the same thing for your brain that you thought alcohol was doing for your brain, only it's empowering you instead of making you feel like garbage.
Oh yeah, I would totally agree with that. I remember, and this is before you got sober, but it was like 2 years ago. I'm a real estate agent. That's what I do for actual money. And I got tired of paying like $40 a pop just for like one flyer to be sent out. I was like, there's got to be a way. Like, I'm not a dumb person, and I don't know. Like, I'm just tired of spending all this money, and it never looked the way I wanted. So I figured out most people were using like Canva. And so I just downloaded Canva, and he would always come up to me and be like, "You've been on Canva for like 3 hours. What are you doing?" And I was like, "Nothing. Like, I'm just playing around." And I would work on like, I would like take a picture of myself and try to like work on Photoshop and stuff. And at first he's like, "You look ridiculous." I'm like, "I know, like, this isn't something I'm going to post. I'm just playing around with it." Or I would take like a picture and then I would like do collages and do little whatevers.
But now look.
Well, but seriously, I had no idea. I mean, and I still don't know what I'm doing, but fast forward to
Looks
now.
like you're doing pretty damn good to me.
People, I didn't know you made that.
Yeah.
She does all this.
Yeah. So I made the logo. I do all the stuff for the podcast. And so, I get people who will reach out mainly to Ryan, and they're like, everything looks so professional.
Ask who do you pay to do all this?
Right. Which is so funny. Because I grew up in musical theater, so more performing arts. And I just looked at him the other day and I was like, who would have thought that all those nights of me just like hyper focusing, and it's great for my ADHD too, right? Because I can sit there and I was like, I'm able to do this. And so when people reach out to me and they're like, what did you do to like figure all this out? I said, honestly, just like, watch some YouTube videos, download Canva, and just play around. Like, there's still, and I'm in the baby steps of it, but you're right. Like, you just sit down and you do it. And I wasn't trying to yield a result. Like, I wasn't trying to make it look any way. I wasn't trying to like get a job in that area. It wasn't about that. It started off with me going, every time I list a house, every time like I need to market something, I'm spending $40 just for one listing, and that gets so expensive. There's got to be an easier way. And I started with templates, and then I learned that I really enjoyed it, and I never thought I would.
Yeah.
So I think.
Well, and so, I was going to say, I'm glad that you said that like you really enjoy it, because oftentimes people are like, "Oh, you're so talented. I could never." And I'm like, it's very nice when people say, like, "You're so talented. You just picked this up and you made that logo. Like, look how talented you are." And it's like, maybe that's part of it, but also like you have to have an interest. Yeah. If you've got an interest in something, you can pretty much, if you are, decent at reading and following instructions, like you can pretty much teach yourself whatever you want as long as you have the interest. And if you want to do something like that, like those things are out there for you too. Mm-hmm. It's that self-limiting belief of like, I'm just not a creative person. And it's like, okay, like if you argue for your limitations, then they're definitely yours. Like you get to keep those. Mm-hmm. But if you like question and you go outside of that, like one of my big drinking ones, like when I was a drinker, was that I just wasn't a morning person. And it wasn't that I wasn't a normal person. It wasn't that I wasn't a morning person. It was that I was a drinker. Yeah. Which made the morning suck, And so it's the same thing with creativity. Like, okay, you aren't a creative person. Do you ever just sit down and try to make something? Because if not, then yeah, you're probably not going to like get into that whole creativity thing.
And that's the thing. And I tell people all the time, especially people that reach out to me, that maybe hear me share in meetings or, share on the forum and Reframe or whatever. It's like, how do you do this? How do you do this? I tried. I literally just took the time, took 5 minutes, take an hour, take 30 days, and just try something and see what the
Yeah.
results, come about. Because it may be something that you had inside of you that you love and you have no idea until you try it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And I also think too, like, there are some people who are like, prodigies, right? I mean, some people like pick up a microphone
Sure.
and they can automatically sing, or like, can do
Sure.
calculus or whatever. So,
Yeah.
but I also think too, when people say, how do you do that? Breaking that down and saying, well, what do you mean? Like, how did I produce this result? How did I find this interest? Because, I tell my daughter this all the time. Success and learning, the definition of learning is fucking up, fucking up, fucking up, fucking up, fucking up until you finally go, oh, okay, there you go. And not making the same mistake over, but going, well, that didn't work, trying something different. That didn't work, trying something different. That didn't work. And it is literally just the going back and critical thinking aspect of it and problem solving. That's called learning. So when people say things like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? How'd you learn to do that? Well, that's a loaded question.
Right.
I mean, I didn't pick up Canva one day saying, oh, I want to be a graphic designer. I picked it up going, I'm fucking tired of paying $1 billion for marketing. And this is ridiculous. And it just turned into that because I didn't have the expectation of being great at it. So I wasn't limited by, I couldn't have designed a logo like that 2 years ago. And and it's pretty. I mean, it's something grand, but like, you use templates, you look at other people's artwork. So like when I really got into it, I would go and I'd be like, well, what are some of my favorite podcasts and what does their studio look like? And what are their like logos look like? You also don't completely reinvent the wheel either.
Yeah.
So you're right. People get in their heads about it and they limit their own creativity. I did a lot of, like community theater growing up. And it's the same as like you were talking about with the pottery classes. Like you're not there because you're trying to like make it to Broadway or make a bunch of money. But that feeling that you get with that community and that high that you get naturally from like, oh my gosh, I love being here. There's no substance that can replace that.
Yeah. I just lost myself for 3 hours thing is like something that a lot of grownups don't get to do. I think that for me, like the thing that hooked me about ceramics was being able to create something that people were able to have a relationship with. And it kind of goes back to the mug, Ryan, that you held up. That was your 1 year mug that you so graciously commissioned me to make. These kinds of projects mean so much to me because we create relationships with the things that we use every single day. I am floored every time someone asks me, like, can you make me a mug with my sobriety date on it? Because I know that like they're going to look at that mug every day. They're going to think about their commitment to not drink. They're going to think about the ritual of brewing the coffee or the tea and having a quiet moment and sitting down. And they're going to know, like I had another person from Reframe say, like, I can't wait until my grandkid asks me about the date on the bottom. I can't wait. And they had been rehearsing this thing. They were like, I've got a few years, he's only 3, but I'm going to have this cup forever. And I'm going to be able to say, like, this was the date that I decided I wanted to change my life. And like the fact that I get to sit and make that, sit at my wheel, meditate, like it's meditation for me, like meditate, make these cups, like put so much detail into painting all of the little stuff on them, putting the sobriety date on it, and knowing that that's going to be part of somebody's ritual of them choosing themselves is like, I mean, there's nothing like it for me.
That's amazing. And speaking of trying new things, you're one of the very few people that tried 75 hard like I did. And you actually succeeded and did it.
I did it.
I was so
proud
of you.
I'm smiling so big. That's actually how I got to, how I first got to know Ryan was, I had heard this crazy person on Reframe talk about all of these things. And, I tried it in January. I'm in Montana. January in Montana is not the time to start 75 hard. it was like -13, -15, and I was on day like 20, and I was like, absolutely not. I can't do this. So I did. I waited a few months, and I also think I was too new in my sobriety. Like, I don't think that 75 hard is for everyone. And I was only like 3 months in, and I tend to get a really defeatist attitude where it's like, okay, I missed my workout. Fuck everything. I might as well drink, you know? So I'm a very all or nothing, which is, I mean, problematic. But I, I think the biggest thing about 75 hard, my biggest takeaway was that those small things do make huge results in the end. Um, I found myself waking up early and going on walks at 6 in the morning. And because I was doing that, I got to witness beautiful sunrises over the mountains, animals just waking up. Like, I never prioritized my own physical health that way, or put my own needs for my own mental clarity above anybody else's. Like, I was a martyr to motherhood. I was a martyr to my own life. I I didn't understand that prioritizing me would make me better everywhere else across the board. And I needed those 75 days. I needed those rules. I needed that structure to help me realize that's what that was about.
Yeah, which makes sense because that's what it was for me too. It's like, I've always been kind of a structured person, until I drank. And then it was just,
Oh yeah.
I didn't give a shit.
Everything went out the door.
Yeah,
It was always
everything.
like twist my rubber arm,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
I'll do
That's when
that,
I try to find the chaos. Yeah,
yeah, I said I was going to do this, but actually this sounds like more fun in
yeah.
that
It's a lot
moment.
more
So
fun.
fuck everything else.
That's right.
I'm going to choose me right now.
Yeah,
And that's all that matters.
and that's what it did for me. It gave me a structure. I mean, I used to never get up, early, and now it's like clockwork. Literally every day, I'm up at least by 5:30, and I start reading. I go into my workout, and I got everything done before everybody even wakes up normally.
Yeah.
Which I would never have tried or done anything like that. And I literally structure my day out. I mean, I keep a schedule and I try to stick to it. Something I would have never done before. And I
Yeah.
get early bedtime now so that I never have to worry about things at night. So yeah, for me, and,
Yeah.
and I'm doing it for a whole year, but obviously for me, it's going to go way beyond that because now it's become a lifestyle to me. And not that I'm going to, follow everything that it says, but having that structure, has really helped me out in my sobriety.
Yeah.
For sure. And again, it's not for everybody. It happens to
No.
work for me. If I'd have had very young children, to me, I don't know if I'd make it 20 days. It'd be really tough. So that's,
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you because having young kids, it's incredible you were able to get through that for 75 days.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot at first. And I think that I was just like so bolstered by the idea that that for the first time in my life, I was really doing what I said I was going to do. That was a big thing for me in my drinking self. I have not been able, I was never really, really, really able to trust myself. And now I do. I think that once you are someone who was a drinker and now isn't a drinker, when you start opening yourself up for other people to check in with you, what that says is that you trust yourself to be sober on any given future date. And I didn't realize that until I had a friend reach out to me this past Saturday who's been in long-term sobriety. By long-term, I say like 8 years. And they've been somebody that I've checked in with off and on throughout me, like start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. I would always check in with them and be like, hey, I'm feeling like I need to stop again. Like, I'm just looking for some support. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew that what I was doing wasn't working. And they checked in with me last weekend, and I got off the phone and I said to my husband, I like started crying. I was like, I can't believe that I am someone who is struggling on a Saturday night thought, you know what? Amy is definitely sober right now. I was floored. I got all teary, and then I realized it was less about them checking in with me and more about me trusting myself to be that sober person for someone else. I'm so grateful. I'm just so grateful to have that. And whatever it is that you're doing, whenever you're stacking those habits, when you're trying to create a new one, you also have to unstack the old ones. Those old habits are there. I call them ghosts. When I used to drink in my studio, like sneaky kind of by myself, drink in my studio. And when I stopped drinking, I would come out here. I had to completely move my wheel to a new place. The bookshelf where I used to set my drink while I was throwing on the wheel is completely gone. Those little ghosts and that muscle memory, I had to completely get rid of. I had to get those ghosts out of my room, out of my space, and I had to like completely redo the inside of my studio so that those things weren't there anymore. If you're someone who sits in front of the couch, or sorry, sits on the couch, watches TV, and you've got that place where you always used to sit your drink. If you are, someone who takes a bath for self-care, but part of your self-care routine was having a glass of wine, whatever shelf it is that you used to sit your wine on, get rid of that fucking shelf. If it's the coffee table, get rid of the coffee table. The little side thing, throw it into the fucking alley. Like, you have to get rid of all of those ghosts that supported your drinking and unstack those habits in order to be able to restack the new habits that you want to support your new future self.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. That's really damn good advice.
It's really
It's
good.
actually something I've never really thought of. We did it because we got rid of furniture. We redid the whole house, painted shit and everything just to make things different than what they were before.
Yeah.
I never even thought about that. So that's hella good advice.
Yeah. I mean, I was just gonna say, like, you as the person who wants to stop drinking or wants to change your relationship with whatever it is, the cycle doesn't end until you end it. And you're the one who has to make those changes, whether it's 75 hard or not drinking or watching less TV or blah, 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 blah. Like, the cycle doesn't end until you end it. And all of the power, you hold all of the power, because I've heard it a million times. Like, nobody's coming to save you. Yeah. And you have to, like, at least for me, I had to become a student of my own problem. I had to like sit back and say, like, okay, so what's really going on here? And what are the warning signs for me? The warning signs for me are my spaces become really cluttered. I put off deadlines. I like push stuff back and push stuff back and push us back. And my self-care kind of goes down. So those things, when those three things start to happen, I'm like, whoa, I need to like come in here and, choose myself and figure out what that is, because my future self is going down a path where I start to talk myself into maybe a drink would help. And so putting up all of those lines of defenses and recognizing the things that are the pattern when I start to get into that like slippery brain space, recognizing those warning signs of myself and being a student of my own problem is like really like the groundwork. That's like ground zero for me.
Gotcha.
I love that. I like that. It's refocusing and also reprogramming your brain.
Yeah, rewiring everything.
Yeah. I mean, I have lots of sober friends, and they said that one of their things was a lot of them like completely moved, whether it be to a different city, a different state. Seriously, my brother did that.
Yeah, he had to.
He when he got sober, he was like, I wanted to think of the last place that I felt authentically myself, where I felt clear and sober and really connected, and it was where we grew up in Texas. So he decided that he was going to go to Texas and live in sober living and did all of that. My friend, she moved to the other side of Tennessee, and they both like changed their phone numbers and just started from ground zero. Now, again, that's not something that's required for everybody, but for them, that's what it was. They're like, I have too many bad connections or behaviors or whatever. So I like that you bring that up, because I think in one way or another, it is absolutely necessary. because otherwise you're kind of just setting yourself up for failure, or you're still in that habit of lying to yourself that you can still maintain those relationships, whether they be with things or people. And also sobriety, you're putting barriers in your way.
I see people all the time fighting so hard to keep alcohol in their lives. They fight like hell. They make all of these rules, flow charts, freaking like put all of these constraints on themselves. And it's like, I didn't realize for me that if I fought even half as hard as I did to keep alcohol in my life, it's so much easier to keep alcohol out of your life. It's so much easier, and you're not missing out on anything. You've done it all. You've done that. It doesn't make anything else more fun or better. You know, I was always like kind of the instigator when I was drinking. Guess what? I'm still the instigator as a sober person. And it's so much more fun because you're not constantly like editing yourself and saying like, oh, are people going to think that I'm doing this just because I was drinking? You know, like you can really double down on being the instigator when you're the sober one. And it's so much better.
That's awesome. Well, we're at that point, Amy, where I got to hear a story from your drinking days.
This whole time we were talking, I totally forgot that you were going to ask this.
Well, you knew it was coming. I mean, you had to think about it, right?
I did think about. I thought about it. So, but I didn't really ever come up with anything except that I was always jealous of the males in my life who could pee anywhere. I was always so jealous of that. You know, and so I decided that the solution was to get a shiwi. Do you guys know what a shiwi is?
It's like a funnel.
Oh, really? I've never heard of that.
Yeah. It's like a funnel.
Okay. Oh my gosh. I'm really excited that you've never heard of this, Ryan. So it's like it almost looks like something that you would put over your face, like an oxygen mask, okay. Right? Only it's got a tube on the bottom. And so what it's for is you like put it right here and you can pee, you can like suction it onto your vulva. Am I allowed to say vulva on this podcast?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. So you kind of like put it on there. And then you can like pee out the front of your jeans or like onto a tree or like onto Goofy's leg at Disney World. So I was like, I want to have that ability. So I get a shiwi. And I start to practice in my backyard. The problem is that like not everybody's parts down there like are the same. And so if you've been holding your pee long enough to use the shiwi, it's going to come out of there with some force.
That's right.
So I start trying to pee into this funnel that's like freaking this big around, and it's just flowing out of the top, down both of my legs, out the funnel, but also down the inside of my thighs. Underwear are wet, my jeans are wet. Like it needs to have like different attachments and a much bigger hose, guys.
That's right. It's got to be a bigger hose.
Yeah. I feel like the inventor of this shiwi was definitely a man.
A man. I knew you were going to say that.
It was a man.
More of a garment.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? It needs to be like underwear and then the tube just like screws on to pee or something.
Oh,
you know
yeah, that could work. But it's still going to back up. And then your butt
that's what
And also, too, like a girl's urethra is so small that we don't pee in like one solid stream like guys do. Like, I mean, and I've peed on like, not on the golf course, but like in the woods when we were playing golf, or like everyone's had a drunken like spring break, you know, in high school or college, and you like pee like under a boardwalk or something. And it always gets on your legs, your clothes. There's just no avoiding it. So I can't even imagine if you're drunk and trying to do that. Not good. So I have follow-up questions. Just for my own imagination. So
is it about the shiwi?
It is. It's about the pee into the shiwi. So you're practicing. I love that you said like you had a game plan. You were like, I'm going to practice.
You really
practice
thought this
makes
out.
Perfect. So were you like in your backyard doing this? Were you in the bathroom, like trying to hit the toilet? Like,
oh, no. In my backyard. In my backyard, lots of neighbors. Yes, I was like, I actually very vividly remember peeing on all of these, like this, I had these beautiful black-eyed Susans, like this big bush of black-eyed Susans. I don't know why, but I tried to pee on those first. That was like my first target.
You just take it and like kind of wave it around at it. Is that what you were doing?
Well, yeah. Isn't that what you do?
Yeah.
I just think it's great that I never even knew this thing existed.
I mean, like, not to get too graphic, but like, we all want to be.
It's on
We want to
Amazon,
know
you
what
gotta
it
get
feels
one.
like to have a dick and just
That's right.
flop it around. Like,
Blow it around.
I can't count how many times I go into the bathroom and you're in the shower, and it's just like, you know, you're just flopping it around. I'm like, what are you doing? You're like, nothing. You know what I mean? I'm throwing water all over the shower. I'm like,
Yeah.
man, I mean, I want to be able to do that. But then on the flip side to that, my brother, who is gay, by the way, and this just proves more and more and more that all men are obsessed with boobs. When I like hit puberty, he was like, it must be great to have boobs. They seem like they'd be so much fun. I would just sit around and like play with them all day long and like jump on trampolines and things like that. And I'm like, no, because men love to play with their penises. They think it is so fun. So they just think we walk around and play
so you
with
gotta
our
find
boobs.
something else to play with.
But I get that. Every single woman in the entire world wants to be able to pee standing up.
1,000%.
And if you've had kids, you most certainly cannot aim. Like any hope that you had of ever even trying to aim.
Yeah.
I mean,
And you also can't jump on trampolines anymore.
no, I mean, I peed myself a little just a few times sitting on this podcast, laughing at everything. Like, you know, he used to ask me, he's like, why do you change your underwear like twice a day? And I'm like, there's a lot of shit that goes on down there.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
All right, Amy. So we're going to get you out here. But before we do, so where can everybody pick up your ceramics? Where can they be found?
My Instagram is Amy York Ceramics, and I cannot take custom orders until 2025. The holidays are absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
So send me a message. I would love to make a special sobriety mug for you, but not until the new year.
That's
Not
a good
until
problem to have.
That's a hell of a problem.
Listen,
It's
our
so
daughter's gotten
time-consuming.
really into ceramics. I know he told you the story about her teacher sending an email. So maybe you'll have a little apprentice here in a couple of years.
That would be so fun. I love it.
All right, Amy. Thank you so much for joining the show. Love you,
Thanks,
girl.
Amy.
Thanks so much.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
If you love the podcast, which I know you do, please like, subscribe,
and hit that notification bell to get
Boom.
notified every time we post.
That's right. Dropping them, baby. Work.